All right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, we are talking all things spirituality and sexuality. And I have the amazing Kortni here with me to discuss all of those things. Kortni, do you want to just give a quick little introduction for everybody listening about what it is that you do, kind of your background, and then we'll kind of dive straight into it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and feel very honored. So I'm Kortni Chimko. I actually grew up on a farm, so very more of like a sheltered life is what I
Mm-hmm.
say. We knew what we knew, and that was kind of all we had. And then when I turned 17, I was immediately moving to Edmonton. And then I took my aesthetics program at Alberta Academy of Aesthetics. And then I just started playing around with a little bit of different things. So I really dove into my spirituality. The thing is we're always all spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's just who wants to use their gifts and how do you want to use your gifts. From a young age, actually, I was able to see things that not a lot of people seen. Um, and honestly, when lots of people were passing away close to us, the night before they would pass away, I actually had dreams that they would come to me, and then I knew they passed the next day.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. Yeah, yeah. And then I actually got scared of it for a while because it
Mm-hmm.
kind of was like a little too close to home. And I think I was about 18 when that happened. And then my mom is really spiritual. So I ended up telling her, I was like, I don't want this anymore. I don't, I was terrified, to be honest
Mm-hmm.
with you. And then we just did like this little prayer kind of thing. And then I didn't have anything come to me for, I don't know, probably 5 years maybe. And I just completely tuned out of my spirituality. I was just like almost scared of it all, but not wanting to even get back into it. And then I went through some hardships in my life and I was like, you know what? I need I need something to latch on to. And I know that sounds terrible, but I needed I needed help and assistance and guidance
Mm-hmm.
from someone who was an outside person. So then I started to dive a little bit more into my spirituality. And I ended up taking my level 1 and 2 Reiki. And yeah, now I am here.
Nice. I think that's what you said is very true, is like sometimes when we are going through things, we do search for something. And I think that's where, people who maybe didn't have a previous practice, whether it be religion, a spiritual practice, or anything, I think that's where sometimes people really can end up going down the road of using actually almost their sexuality as a way to, fill some sort of voids and to seek for healing and things like that, right? And I've talked about that on other episodes. So for you, obviously, because you had a practice before, you kind of knew what that looked like. Going through things in your own struggles, you were able to switch gears back into, your spirituality and really pull on that for, your own healing and your own personal growth. As far as it comes to your personal sexuality, was that anything that you ever really struggled finding balance in? Was that something that, was awakened in you kind of later on? Or did you see the correlation in the two at a young age?
Um, to be honest with you, I feel like where I really dove into my spirituality and my sexuality was when I went through my divorce. I was divorced previously. I'm
Mm-hmm.
remarried now. And when I went through that, I just felt like I completely was disconnected from myself.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, the unworthiness, or am I good enough, or am I not good enough? Like, what's going on? And I feel like we're so often allowing others to look at us naked and allowing others to use our sacred temple for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't do it as much for ourselves. And so I was like, you know what? I completely lost touch of, like I said, my whole portal in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started to be like, okay, what is it that I can do for myself that is going to reconnect from my spiritual self to my physical body? And to be honest with you, one thing that I was actually watching, I can't even remember what video I was watching, but the lady was like, you know what? Just stand in front of a mirror and dance naked. Look at every inch of your body, because again, we so often let others just look at ourselves naked,
Mm-hmm.
and and we don't typically admire what we truly have. So I feel like that, I hope that answers your question.
No, for sure. Like it definitely makes sense, right? And I think that that is the thing. It's usually an external validation when it comes to our own sexuality or even looking at ourselves, but like a comparison component to it, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
be able to do that freely and then like I guess love what you see for all the
Yeah.
flaws and everything with it is kind of coming back to yourself and like coming back to that centered, being within ourselves, that I think very easily we do get lost from, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do like, don't get me wrong. At the beginning, I was like, ugh, it's
Mm-hmm.
stress that takes over your body and comes into a physical form as well. That you're looking at yourself and you're like, this is ridiculous. Like, why am I standing in
Mm-hmm.
front of a mirror naked? Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? And now it's like a daily practice that I try to do just just to connect with myself, because
Mm-hmm.
again, like I feel like we're so disconnected in when it comes to sexuality and spirituality, because you think, oh well, if you're super sexual, then why you're not spiritual, like these are the guides and these are the things that come to us, and when it's like, no, it's all intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that was another thing too. And when I ended up seeing a psychic, and she was like, you are so out of tune with your body and your sexuality. And I just remember being like, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why, what? And I remember just kind of leaving, and I was kind of mad, to be honest with you. I was like, well, what does she know? Like,
Yeah.
and I started to question myself, and I was like, okay, well, if this is triggering me, maybe it is. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am completely out of tune with my body and my sexuality. I don't know. And again, and I ended up seeing another psychic lady, and she was just like, yeah, I think it goes down to your father, your like the abandonment wound,
Mm-hmm.
and when we don't feel safe sexually, then we're not going to give ourselves typically to the right person, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, so I found that was a big connection as well. When you're diving into it, it's like, you know what, where your body is so sacred, and
Mm-hmm.
you are a goddess at the end of the day. So tune into it, be proud of what you have, because if we all had the same bodies and all the same sexuality and all the same desires, it'd be boring.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So with you saying that, so this has like been, I guess, my biggest thought process of where I go back and forth and thinking and where I guess I struggle. Because I've always been a very sexual person. I've always known I was a very sexual person. I've always believed in the spiritual side of things more so, and that's what I'm drawn to, and that is more of the practice that I have. However, because of the social stigmas that come around sexuality in itself, and it's the cycle, like it's dark, this and that, it's like I've always thought, okay, well, for people who the reality is not everybody has a relationship, not everybody is with a partner, not everybody finds a partner that easy in life, and there's a lot of men and women who are single people but they still want to embrace the sexual side. And I mean that sometimes comes with having multiple partners and being a sexual person and still enjoying orgasms and all of those things. And so I guess on the spiritual side, you're right. We are goddesses, our bodies are temples. But what do you say to the person then who struggles with that thought process? Well, it's like I'm a spiritual person. However, it's like to I guess in that regard, it's just like my body's supposed to be this temple, and you're not really supposed to let, they say not to let so many people in, use it, whatever, but then to honor our sexual side and not just through masturbation, because I mean there's so much more to sexuality than self pleasure. Not saying that it's not amazing, but I mean we all crave a masculine touch and that connection. So where do you see those two? Because I mean that is a lot of stress, I think, and pressure that it's like I always had on myself is like, oh, okay, so I can't have sex with anybody unless they are the right person who could potentially become the one. But the reality is then I mean, I'm depriving myself of sometimes it'd be a year or 2 years of not being in it with anybody if I wasn't actually out there I guess in having casual sex in a way. So I know that was a long-winded kind of question, but if you're understanding kind of what I'm saying, so where do you see those fitting together?
The thing is that we are always judging ourselves. So it's like, oh, well, if you have more than 10 partners, then you're a
Mhm.
slut.
Mhm.
That's usually what we get labeled as. But it's okay for a male to sleep with 50 people and they don't get called a slut. So it's kind of like, it's something we have to, I believe, truly unlearn. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong way of doing anything.
Mhm.
It's your destiny, it's what you choose to do with yourself. If people are going to judge on based on how many sexual partners, because again, we do have sexual needs. Everybody
Mhm.
has it, whether they choose to admit it or not. So, and that can go to having other sexual partners. And I've seen it with people having sexual partners, multiple sexual partners at the same time.
Right.
That's okay. There's no, just because you decide to go that route doesn't mean that you're less spiritual or that you're undeserving of something else. No, that's what we're programmed to think.
Mhm.
And I believe that is such an old school way of thinking as well, is because you get married, and trust me, I've done this myself. I decided to get married at a young age because I wanted to latch on to what could give me babies and what life looked like or was supposed to look like to a farmer's wife,
Mhm.
And when I started to unlearn that and see that no, that's so wrong. You can have sexual desires, you can have multiple sexual partners. It's whatever you choose. It's not for
Mhm.
everybody, but that's anything when it comes to anything sexual. Some people may like anal and some people might not. That doesn't mean that the person who likes anal is worse than the person who
Right.
doesn't. Like it's it's about what you choose to do. And really I find some, for instance, when especially when I talk to some clients, they're like, "Oh, but I want to try this, but I'm too scared to try that because I'm scared of being judged or
Mhm.
you know, I'm not going to look like this to this
Right.
person." And it's like, first of all, who the hell cares what you look like to that person?
Yeah.
That's on them. Secondly, if you have a sexual desire, go do it. Like go try it. You may absolutely love it and that might make you show up as a better human too,
Mhm.
because you're getting that need fulfilled. So I hope I answered your question. I hope we were
No,
kind
for
of on the
sure.
same page.
Yeah, no, that does totally make sense, right? And as a Reiki practitioner, then when you are talking with clients and you are having some of those conversations, what is it, I guess, then in a way, or the tips or the things that you would tell them from a practitioner side of things that they can do to, I guess, one, energetically protect themselves? Um, I guess from I've always been a firm believer that, we take on the energy of the people that we are, sleeping with. And I'm not sure if we talked about it before, but, like the whole using a condom thing is one way to, energetically protect you from taking on that person's stuff. So, in another way, though, where we can still honor ourselves as, goddesses and all of these things and protect our energy, what are some other things that you would give people as tools or things they can do to do that as well, but still in the same sense honoring their sexuality and being able to enjoy pleasure and desire with let's say multiple partners?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And it's going to look different for everybody at the end of the day. You kind of got to, on a spiritual journey, like I said, there's no right or wrong way of doing
Hmm.
things. It's what resonates with you specifically. I find, and this is going to kind of be a double answer to that, but I find when a lot of people are coming to me and they're like, when it comes to the Reiki and the energy healing, there's a massive disconnect when it comes to their sexuality. And lots of the reason being is because of the mother wound or the mother lineage or the father lineage. I find that sometimes there's like we carry a lot of generational stuff with us,
Hmm.
and we need to like cut those wounds and break those bonds. I find when someone comes to me and they're like, you know what, I didn't feel safe having sexual desires with this person and sexual contact with this person. I just feel like it's stuck with me. What can I
Hmm.
do? And one of the biggest things I always say is like a cutting of the cord. So I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So basically you're just visualizing yourself with connected to this person, but then you're cutting it. You're cutting those cords, those energetic cords from that other person to you, and letting it go. And another thing too is like you can sage yourself, you can sage the room, you can make it your comfort space.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I find that lots of people are like, you know what? I put a rose quartz crystal on my bedside table to help me with the self love that I may be lacking, but I'm hesitant with trying this sexual stuff with this person. But I'm also like, I'm kind of myself in this like weird, I don't even know how to explain it, like weird, you go internally kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like, oh, yeah, there's a disconnect. I want to try it, but I'm too scared to try it of the fear of being judged.
Right.
So I would say rose quartz crystals in your bed or wherever you're deciding to have sexual intercourse with yourself or the other person is a really powerful tool because you're allowing that self-love back into yourself, which is going to blossom. Again, any kind of crystals or anything like that, they look nice.
Mm-hmm.
and and I feel like that is a very powerful tool too. I've actually been talking to this other lady as well about, I don't know if you've heard of yoni eggs.
I have. Yeah, I bought one like 2 years ago, but I honestly haven't actually done anything with it. So yeah, if you want to maybe, I guess, explain really the benefit of it and a practice to use for that.
Yeah, so the practices. I do recommend contacting someone that is educated in that realm, and there's a lot of new teachers coming out about it who are just connecting with the sexuality specifically. So you don't want to just be sticking anything up there just in case it doesn't come out. But
Right.
yoni eggs are just like a little tiny egg, and they all come in different shapes and sizes, and they're essentially a crystal. And at the bottom, at the tip part, there is a little kind of it's almost like drilled in it, and it
Mhm.
you attach like a little string to it. And so when you put it in, you have the capability of being able to pull it out. And certain crystals do certain things. I always say pick one when it comes to a yoni egg for you specifically that you're guided to. And then you basically just pleasure yourself with it, and you get to connect with yourself, really, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, that's the biggest relationship that you need to nourish is the one with yourself.
Yeah. No, definitely. Um, I find too that it's always easier for us to give to another person, give to a man, and give to them sexually more so than it is for us to give to ourselves individually, and to actually take the time and, really learn about our bodies in that way. And I found it was, I mean, porn was always a go-to for, something to watch. It's a very quick mental stimulation, and, you can masturbate with a vibrator and you're done in 30 seconds, right? And that was always my go-to main thing. And I found a couple years ago, it was like just over a year ago, it was like all of a sudden everything just shut off. It's like my sex drives shut off, everything
Mhm.
completely shut down. And I was like, what is happening? This is not my norm. And I mean, like, I was in my late 30s at the time. So it's like everything I'd known about my body, everything I had, used before to pleasure myself, it was just non-existent. And it was very frustrating because we always are searching for that quick something, right? And it's like I was getting angry, but it was almost like I had to come back to learning about myself. It's like my body and everything to do with my sexuality completely shut down because it was like, no, you need to heal some of these deep rooted, issues I had around my sexuality and judgment and, probably past things. And it's like my body wanted to reconnect with my mind and my mind wanted to reconnect with my body. But because it's not what I was comfortable with and familiar with, I was frustrated and I didn't want to do it. And I felt weird doing it. And it was after I think probably 8 months, I was like, okay, I got to figure something out. And I just remember it was like things, it's like I had to almost connect in a way where it's like you're making love to yourself. Like you had to really breathe into discovering who you were. And it was just this newfound, I don't know, it was so different, but I found like that almost helped me reconnect to like my spirituality in a way where it was just like, oh, like there's a whole other side of me as a person, spiritually and sexually, that it's like I didn't even know existed because I had been doing things kind of against really what I was probably craving. But those are things that I was probably really craving in a connection in a relationship with a man as well. But because externally I was never receiving that, it was always more casual. It was just like, no, no, no. If we're going to do this together, it's just like in me, it's like there had to be like a change. And it was weird, but it was uncomfortable. And then I think of how many, women just really struggle with connecting to themselves and feeling silly and feeling stupid. And it's like you said, like standing naked in, the mirror and dancing. And it's like we forget that there's so much more to our own beings that we're not even tapping into on such a deep spiritual and sexual level, that it really would enhance so many different areas of our life. And I think in doing that for ourselves, it then allows us to speak up more with a partner of what it is we've discovered that we really, what we need, what we like, what works for us in a sensual way, right? If
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
totally. And a thing to think about too is, and when I work with people as well, is I say, think about sometimes different partners that you've had sex with. Okay. Think about, there's been good times that you've had sex with people. And then I'm sure we've all been through it where it's just like, that is just, there's no
Mm-hmm.
connection, like the sex was just not going back to that. So it's the same kind of relationship with yourself, but we don't think like that. So it's like if there's a disconnect, everything is made up of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to, our when we start to realize that, okay, well, we're confident in ourselves, because as women we're so judgmental to one another and to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. We just are. And so when we start to be like, oh, well, that person must have wild sex, why can't I be like that? Then
Mm-hmm.
then it's like you all of a sudden start to retract and you go down a worse rabbit hole. But when you're curious and you're like, you know what, why can't I do that, you know
Mm-hmm.
instead of, that is empowering when you're talking to your girlfriends and she's like, wow, I just had amazing wild sex. It's like, that's so empowering. I want to be like that, like, good. Ask. There's nothing wrong with that. And be like, how did you connect with yourself? how
Mm-hmm.
how do you masturbate? How do you have sex? What is your partner like? Those are topics that lots of people don't want to talk about, but when you have those conversations, it's like, oh, okay. It's like reading a book.
Yeah.
You go and read a book about a lot of things, but why are you not willing to talk to the people that you hang out with about how they do
Yeah.
things? Or it's like, nope, that's private. That's off limits. When it's like, but you're willing to go read a book from a random stranger who wrote it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I why? you know? And so I find too is like, when you're having sex and there's that, energetic um relationship between the two of you, and it could be a one night stand, and it could be someone that you've been seeing for a really long time. When there's that energetic connection, you almost feel like, okay, well, I feel safe to try these things, and
Mm-hmm.
if not, well, then whatever, bye. Like, these are my needs. Why are you dishonoring your needs to please someone else?
Yeah. Well, and I
you
think
know
that's just the habit we get into, right? Is because we're craving connection so bad and, seeking an external partner, that we start to think like, okay, well, this person will work. And then it's like we're sacrificing other aspects of things that we probably really need. And then we stop honoring that spiritual, sexual, sensual side of ourselves because, that person might not be on the same in the same place that we are at that time, and then we let go of those things for them. But I find when we do that, it really, it's more of a block. There becomes more blocks energetically for myself, in all aspects of my life. And then it's just like, what is it that I'm doing that is creating this? And it's like, well, I'm not honoring the things that I actually really need. I'm not honoring the things that actually really work for me that I desire from my partner, because we've chosen a person who doesn't align with those things, but because we seek that validation, usually in a very unhealed spot or place in our journey, we convince ourselves that it's okay, right?
Hmm. And I find too, think about in relationships when you've been with people for, at the beginning of a relationship, the sex is wild. It's
Mm-hmm.
fun. You're in your honeymoon stage for a reason. You're willing to try all the things. There's this massive connection between the two of you, typically, that the sex is unreal. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you start to get comfortable and you start to become a little bit of a disconnect, and those feelings start to come in and the energy starts to flow, well, why is it that it almost sometimes becomes not a chore, because that's a bad word, but like it's comfortable sex. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same sex usually a lot of the time. You have to sometimes schedule it in, but why?
Mm-hmm.
Like why is there such an, like, that's where I truly believe that you need to connect back with yourself and communicate with your partner.
Yeah.
And that can again look like anything. And I find too, when I'm doing Reiki, on clients or on myself or friends and family, whoever it may be, when something sexual comes up, and I find, okay, well, there's a communication error going on in your
Mm-hmm.
relationship between the two of you. What's your sex like? And then they're like, what? Like, what?
Yeah.
Well, and then I'm like, dive deep. What is your sex like? What's your sex life like? This doesn't have to be with your partner. This can be with yourself. What is it
Mm-hmm.
like? What do you desire? What do you do? And then they're like, I actually don't know. And then it's like, okay, well, now you need to do some
Mm-hmm.
searching and you need to heal some wounds with yourself and explore. That's what life's about. We're here on earth, and it's earth school. I always say this is school. We're
Yeah.
here to learn our lessons. We're here to do different things. We're here to try all of the things. So why does it have to be all the same, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And it's very true, right?
Yeah.
We're always learning, and I think we're always learning about ourselves, and we're always, the more I find that, we tap into ourselves in that way, the more we discover about ourselves, and the more desires or interests or pleasures that we discover that we have, which really just expands, I think, us as a whole, personally as a human being, which, and then when you have that energy and you're putting that outwards, I really do find it is kind of contagious to the people that you're around, right? Um, and then you're able to share what those practices are, and you're able to share the journey, and it usually inspires other people to kind of really look within and like look at kind of what they're doing and spark that curiosity for themselves, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's it. And if you're not able to feel safe and comfortable with the friend group that you're in,
Mm-hmm.
then it's okay to ask other people who may be more open to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they might have their own stuff that they're dealing with. You never truly know what one is going through. So if you don't feel safe within your core community, there's so many people out there who are willing to talk about sex and openly talk about sex. I
Totally.
think it's such a healthy thing to do. And again, I remember we were talking about this, where it's like we're so often to talk about sex when we're trying for a baby to
Yeah.
conceive, but we're not willing to talk about it just day to day.
Yeah.
It's like, nope, that's awkward. I don't want to, I feel uncomfortable. But when it comes to trying and conceiving for a baby, all of a sudden you're willing to talk to your parents about it, and people are willing to give you, you know,
Yeah.
like advice, I guess, to say on what positions to try and when to try it. And, oh, go out and have a few drinks and have fun sex.
Yeah.
But when you're all of a sudden not trying to conceive, it's like, no, that topic is off topic.
Yeah.
It's like, but why?
And it's so true, because I feel like by doing that, we're missing connecting with people in a way where it's like things that maybe you find to be weird about yourself, or maybe you're like, well, why doesn't this work for me, or how come when I try this I don't get this reaction in my own body or when I'm with a partner, and you start to kind of think like, oh, maybe there is something wrong with me. But it's like when you have those open conversations with your friends or other people, and then they relate and they're like, no, that happens to me too, that's so normal, like you just try this instead, or, go get that instead, right? And you would never know those things unless you're having those conversations comfortably. And I had this conversation with my girlfriend the other day, and we were talking about just like clits in general. And I had asked her, like, oh, like, is yours super sensitive as well? And like, a lot of women say how, they love oral pleasure and they can have these orgasms. Like, can you do that? And she's like, oh my God, no. And I was like, what? Really? Because you just assume but that every girl does. And then if you're somebody who really doesn't, you're like, oh, well, I'm the oddball, or there's something wrong with mine or my body or my connection. And then when you talk to other women, you're like, no, 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 like, yeah, I need this. And then you start to realize there's so many more people that maybe are that have struggled with the same things that you have sexually, have the same experiences that you do. But because we're not having the conversations, you don't realize that. And then you start to kind of feel, I guess that's maybe where you feel a little bit of shame in your own body, right? And then you're harder on yourself. And then I think that's where you can lose touch with your sexuality, because you feel like things aren't the way that they're supposed to be compared to what they appear to be, what is out there that you see, right?
Yeah, totally. And I'm with you on that one. I feel
Mhm.
like that's when people retract, and that's when people start to go into a shell because it, oh, well, she doesn't do it, so
Mhm.
I shouldn't. That's weird that
Right.
and
Yeah.
and that's that's something we need to unlearn as a society, is
Mhm.
that if we all liked the same things, if we all did the same things, I'm sorry, but this world would be really fucking boring. Like, it would not be fun.
Mhm.
It'd be the same thing over and over and over again. But that's what makes our experiences, and that's what changes everything on an energetic level, is being able to try different things and being able to have an open dialect and open conversation about it, instead of just being like, oh, no. Like, it's even when girls come to see me and they're getting spray tans, and I'm like, oh, what are you what are you getting a spray tan?
Mhm.
Like, are you getting in an underwear completely naked? They're like, people get it naked. I don't want you to see, like, and then they stand there and they're like, oh, I don't want to, I'm covering my boobs. And I'm like, girl, you know what? I've seen it all. We all have different body types. They're all beautiful. Who gives a shit?
Mhm.
What, like, you think I'm going to sit here and judge you while I'm giving you a service? Like, no,
Yeah.
not one bit. But you're willing to show it to someone else,
Yeah.
your partner. But all of a sudden it's like you put up that own block in judgment on yourself almost.
Yeah.
And you assume everybody else is judging you, when most people aren't. They don't really, what you may think is ugly is what someone else may think is absolutely beautiful. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's a thing when it comes to sex and anything in that realm, is what you may think is crazy, the other person might think is not okay. And what you may think is not okay, the next person might be like, that is the only thing, like, that is the best
Mhm.
sex I've ever had. So I feel like we are our own worst judge. We're our own worst enemy at times.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's the hardest thing I think to unlearn, because you grow
Mhm.
up hearing things a certain way, seeing things a certain way. And then because those aren't open conversations, you really do just take on everything that you've read or heard. And it's usually not coming from a healthy place or a place of acceptance. And then
Mhm.
that's the programming that we have when it comes to all things, sexual and for our own personal sexuality. But
And we're
like,
taught that in
yeah,
school, at
yeah,
a young age. We're taught, you have sex, you have sex one time, you're going to get pregnant and your life
mhm,
is over. No,
yeah,
like, first of all, it's not that easy to get pregnant. Second of all, no, you have sex. Even if you do have sex, you have a baby the first time. Who cares? Now you
mhm,
get to explore different things. Like, all the power to you. That's
yeah,
your journey, and
yeah,
that's okay.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's so true. I do have one question for you. It's a personal question.
Yes.
So, how do you personally honor your own sexuality and express it?
Like, just personally, or with my partner, or just by myself?
I guess like personally, like some people maybe dress a very specific way that makes them, feel very sexual, and like in that way, that's how I guess they choose to. express it, or in honoring it, some people do have very specific, self pleasure, not rituals or things that they will do. So what are your go-tos for you?
You know, I wish I was one for lingerie and all of that. I've done it like a couple
Mhm.
times and I'm like, damn, but usually it's always off anyways.
Mhm.
I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah.
For me personally, I find that I love to look at myself naked. And I know that might sound really conceited, but I find that like each curve, each, stretch mark, each thing that's going on in my body, I honor it because that has gotten me to where I am now. Like my
Mhm.
body has been through so much. Everybody's body has, but I look at my body and I'm like, damn, sometimes, and I know this is probably going to be too much, but I will just like stand in front of a mirror and instead of just like standing there looking at myself, naked and
Mhm.
dancing and enjoying the music and feeling the energy around me, I'll sometimes just stand there and like examine my own vagina. Like, I
I
know it
love
sounds
that.
crazy, but like, I read it in a book once and they were like, does anybody know what their own, like,
Mhm.
private parts look like? And when I read that part, I was like, I don't know if I actually truly know what it looks like,
Mhm.
like everything, what someone else would view it as. And so I started doing that and I was like, damn, okay. Like, like I've gotten waxed before. She's seen it more than I
Yep.
did at that point. And it's like, but why? Like that's my body. Why
Yep.
am I not looking at that? So that's something I find, and I know that's probably way out there, but I've encouraged a lot of women who have gone through, bad breakups or divorces or
Mhm.
been sexually abused or anything like that to really connect back with yourself, really look at your body, admire your body, like
Mhm.
admire every stretch mark, every curve, every hair, everything that's on your body, admire it for what it is because it has been through a lot and there is a story in every part of it. So that's one thing I personally do, and I love it. I try to do it like as much as I can. I obviously
Mhm.
don't do it every day, but like, and even when I'm having sex with my husband, I'm just like sometimes like look at myself or I look at him admiring me.
Yeah.
Damn, like, damn.
I love that. And honestly, I feel like that's the one area, if anything, that we really should be conceited about and really should
Mhm.
just think so highly of ourselves for everything that, we do have, what we do look like. Because, like you said, our bodies, they go through so much. They go through so many changes from the time that we were young to the time that we were adults, kids, even without kids. The changes are insane. And I think to really accept and love every inch and to love, your vagina and to look at it and, to really actually know those things about yourself and love those things about yourself could be very empowering for a woman, right? And we should be able to have that at the bare minimum of anything that we really think about ourselves. I do think that's a beautiful practice actually for women to have and for anybody listening to actually try, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing too that I encourage is like, and this is something I've done. We used to do like monthly, no word of a lie, monthly when I first moved to the city with me and my girlfriends, is having a sex toy party. Because I find that there's so much power in it. Whoever's hosting it usually
Mhm.
makes you feel like you're safe.
Yeah.
And so when you go to a sex toy party with your girlfriends, even if you want to do it with your partners, that's amazing too.
Mhm.
But if you do it with your girlfriends, then it gives that open safe door to be able to be like, oh, how was that? Or how did that treat? How was that? Like, how was that for you? It's
Right.
almost opening that door to have those safe conversations
Yeah.
where you don't feel judged on either end of the thing. So I highly encourage, I don't know if they still do them. I haven't done one or been to one in a while, but I found that there was so much power. And previously on one of my stay gets, the girls hosted me a sex toy party in BC and it was amazing. My mom was there and my auntie was there. They were kind of just like standing in the corner, but we all had fun. We
Right.
enjoyed it. We like had a couple drinks, and I'm not saying you need to drink in order to enjoy it, but like we just enjoyed our company. And we, you know, some people were making jokes because that was their way of being able to have open conversations
Mhm.
about it and being able to talk about it. And then some people were like, oh my God, like, look at this dildo. Like, this is what this does. Like,
Right.
you need to get this one because you're, you know, how is your sex life? Like, what are you doing for yourself? This one pleasures you in this way. And there was just so much power within it that I highly encourage everyone to do it. Honestly, I think it's very powerful.
I could see that for sure. And yeah, I think I remember lots when I was like younger, it was a thing, but you know, I'm sure there's still a company, it's still around, but you're right. That is a great way for women to get together in a safe place, have, you know, something to eat and have open discussion where they realize everybody that's there is there for the same thing and the same type of conversation. You know, it's different when it's like you go to like, say, like a barbecue or friends get together and it's like you got two people in the corner talking about sex or the last weekend's hookups, and then everybody else is off talking about, you know, I don't know, their dogs and something else. And you're like, oh, yeah, like you feel awkward to join the conversation. But in that place, it is, this is what we're here for. We're all going to talk about it. We're all going to laugh, share, learn something. And it's another
Yeah.
way to bridge that gap and have those conversations, right? Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if those parties aren't around, make a girls' day out of it.
Yeah.
Like go to a sex, you know, a sex store and have fun with it.
Hmm.
Like go and buy some things, bring it home because that's what you're there for. You're there to have you're going there to have those open dialect.
Yeah.
You're there to at the end of the day everybody has sex whether they choose to admit it or
Yeah.
not. Like we all have sex. So why not feel free to talk about it
Hmm.
and go and buy the toys and compare your toy to this person's toy. And then when you feel comfortable, when you feel safe to do it with your girlfriends, typically you're going to feel safe to bring those into the bedroom as well. And then that opens a whole new realm of fun.
No, that's so true. Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. That's a really good idea, actually. Little Saturday afternoon, you know, go for some brunch and mimosas and then hit up a toy store.
Yeah, like how
Yeah.
amazing would that be?
Yeah.
I'd have
No,
to do
it's
that
so
again.
true. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm so glad that you were able to have this conversation with me and for everybody listening. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you? You also have a podcast, which I love listening to and I love the value that you bring. So could you just share with people where they can find you, where they could listen to all of your stuff?
Yeah, thank you. So, I have a podcast called the Soul Haven Podcast, and that's on any streaming device. So, Apple, Spotify, whatever you name
Hmm.
it. I have a couple Instagrams. So, my Instagram for my podcast is at Soul Haven Podcast. And then for the spiritual portion of things, you can find me and my husband have a business called Kokoro and Jade. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook as well at Kokoro and Jade. And then Kokoro is Kokoro and then and Jade. And then if you feel like following along on my business journey for my spa, you can find me at Touch of Serenity on Instagram and Facebook.
Nice. Thank you so much. And yeah, I honestly, for any of the women out there listening that are, you know, kind of getting in touch with their sexuality and their spirituality, I highly recommend going and seeing, you know, Kortni or any Reiki practitioner in your area that you can. I found them so powerful, the information that comes through and the, you know, what it can do for you for healing and especially for healing those, you know, those wounds that we do hold deep in our, you know, in our root and our sacral and stuff that can affect our sexuality as well. So definitely seek that out. It's amazing. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, honestly, and using this as a safe space too. I love that there's like no judgment. It's an open dialect, and I love what you're doing. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful you were able to be here. And thank you to everybody listening. And we will see you guys next week.